What was the reaction to you in WCW when you came in there? Because this is now guys that pay no attention to international wrestling, could care less about what's happening in Mexico or Japan, could care less what's happening in ECW or any of those type of places. Guys like Luger and Sting and Hogan and Hall and Nash. And did they have an open mind when you came in, or was it once again kind of one of those things where they were kind of snickering at you or not really believing what you could do until they saw you?
Oh, it was definitely, there was a lot of snickering.
So tell us about the first day you walk in the locker room. Who did you see? Like, who was laughing at you?
Well, here's the crazy thing, man. I didn't realize until I was there at the time. But my first match with WCW was a pay-per-view. I mean, they didn't even bring me in for a tryout or like we normally do now for WWE.
Yeah.
They just threw the card. And I believe I was opening match for a Great American Bash against Dean Malenko. So I was like, all right. But as soon as I walked into the locker room, Lex was there. Hogan came in later. But of course, Lex, when he first saw me, like, it was kind of one of those stare downs, like, what's this kid doing in this locker room, man? The one guy that has always been cool, up to date, Scott Steiner. And,
really?
Yeah, I was able to meet him in ECW. So when I walked into WCW for the first time, he was there, man. And he was really cool.
Well, he might have seen you, though, because Scott had spent a lot of time in Japan, too. And like I said, if you worked in Japan in the mid-'90s, you knew who Rey Mysterio was. And if you looked through any magazine, you would see that. So maybe that's why. Maybe he kind of had heard about you and knew kind of what you could do.
I hope so, man, because even to the day now, I've always said that one of my superstar heroes growing up was Scott Steiner, for just being such a big dude. And I don't know if you remember him pulling off those Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Man, it was just awesome. I would just love to see him do that move over and over. And believe it or not, man, that's where one of my creations came from seeing him pull out the Steiner.
Yeah.
And me being able to be a smaller guy, but just to execute it from any side of the ring.
I was going to ask you if you have any good Steiner stories from TNA.
It's funny. Like once I got to know him and work with him in TNA, he was a sweetheart, man.
Yeah.
It's funny, like him and Petey, all the stuff that he had to do with Petey and all the stuff Petey did with him. He was just a lot cooler than you would expect. You know what I mean? And not to disparage him, but you think a guy with his persona on television, you'd think he would be like, ooh, I don't want to get on his bad side. But he was such a sweetheart, and once you got to know him, he was one of the nicest guys ever.
But I mean, these Petey stories that go around the locker room, they're everything.
Oh yeah. Petey was great. Yeah, and Petey dealing with.
I mean, like Petey telling us stories of Scott Steiner.
Sure. They were great, and Petey was like. Petey had the cadence down, and he would do the, well, let me tell you, you talk and throw the hand to the side like Scott would. And like for that period when he was little Petey Pump, he was living it, man. He was living it. It was awesome.
That's great.
I'm wrestling Scotty Steiner, who's an animal. He's an animal in the ring, and he's so believable on so many different. And I had some of my best matches with Scotty. We had great matches together.
But Scott Steiner is one of these guys, and people don't know in the wrestling world. Some guys are gentle.
No, but Scotty's not like that. No, Scotty does not hit that hard.
He doesn't hit hard.
He went to hit me with a belt so many times. He never hit me once. Every
Really?
time, it looked like he ripped my head off. Now, the night we're supposed to do it, where he's going to hit me with a belt, and I'm going to bleed out, I'm going to cut myself. But I've got these tapes on my wrists, and both of them have been unraveled, and I don't know where I lost the blade.
You lost your little razor.
So I look up at Scotty, and I go, dude, I lost the blade. He's like, oh man. And I look over to the referee. I go, I'm laying on my back. I go, Red Nick, you got a blade? He's like, no, I ain't got one.
The referee, if he's got a blade in his pocket.
Sometimes he'd have an extra one,
No way.
And I looked back at Scotty. I said, come with a belt, bro. because I'm not passing out with the blood.
Right.
I'm not doing. If he knocks me out with the belt, he knocks me out with the belt.
So you're saying he's going to take the championship belt and he's going to slam you as hard as he can with it.
He's going to come with it, and you'll see me normally where I would be gone. At the last second. This is one of right before the matches, right before WCW went down.
Yeah.
It's the last man standing match.
Is that pay-per-view?
Yeah, it was a pay-per-view.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, and right the last second you'll see me tilt my head.
Yeah.
Like I go into it. Like nobody goes into a punch.
No.
Everyone goes away from a punch. In real life, Muhammad Ali, I don't care who it is.
That's not even your natural instinct.
No.
Like you have
blood in a punch, like, see you.
Yeah. And I had, but when he hit me, dude, boom, it was like it was a real bump, you know.
Oh.
And I'm a little dazed.
Yeah.
And I looked up at him. I could just imagine those little Tweety birds over.
Yeah.
And I go, did we get it? And he looks right before he stops me. He goes, oh, we got it. And he stopped me right in the face, and the blood freaking went all everywhere. And WCW's thing was about blood. They pulled the cameras back.
No.
I was so pissed off.
No.
I was so pissed off. You can see I'm bleeding, but it doesn't look like I'm bleeding.
Right.
And it doesn't look like that. I was so pissed off.
I also remember some of your later matches with Steiner near the end of WCW. I always thought those were really good matches.
They were awesome, man. I had a lot of fun with Scotty and Robbie. But
I think he was a guy people believed could actually hurt Goldberg.
Well, see, there you go, man. That made it fun to be in there with a guy that people, actually believed could get down, and, that I couldn't just steamroll.
For Shoot, who was the biggest badass in the back that you ever worked with? I know that the bookers always like to favor the real life tough guys. And I've heard the stories, whether it was Orndorff or Haku, Road Warrior. I hear these different stories, but who in the locker room for your tenure, was legitimately the guy when he spoke, you guys respected it out of fear? You were actually, the guy was actually viewed as a genuine tough guy.
I don't think Scott Steiner really had to say much. He just incredibly athletic, has a mean streak from here to Bay City, Michigan, and I'm in Tennessee. Generally a nice guy, but you just, both the Steiner brothers, but Scott in particular was one guy that I don't think anybody, ever thought about, even considered pushing the buttons wrong.
He had been wrestling. He started out, I think, in Independence in Ohio. Maybe I'm trying to think. Didn't he spend some time in Michigan and Ohio, and then Memphis, maybe?
Perhaps.
So he'd been wrestling for a short time here. But I mean, he was what a fucking athlete. Both the Steiners were. So he was good from the beginning, even though they were. Once again, it was like being in a friendly street fight at some point with Rick and Scott both, because they were so strong, but they weren't dangerous. They were just stiff, and you could tell right off the bat we got something. These two fucking All-Americans from Michigan. He looked good. Rick Scott was the prettier of the two, but Rick was the more experienced of the two. But they both kind of took to things like a duck to water. So there was a good point. Mm-hmm. And the Midnight later on would go to have, tremendous matches with the Steiners. Robin Green had come in as a fan of the Steiners and a fan of Rick in particular, and this meek, demure, timid little thing, and then suddenly, finally, when they go on their first date, she's revealed as this hot, fucking incredible, and I mean, Nancy was just gorgeous, and so it was something that Nancy was great. She did a great job at anything she was asked to do. She'd been around the business for a while. It was Kevin's deal, so he was shepherding it to make sure it didn't go sideways, and it really put a lot of attention on the Steiners, and especially on Rick, who was so great at being a goofball, the dog-faced gremlin. That's how he was a heel, or he was a baby face, but he had been a heel with the Varsity Club, right? But he still got over with that. He was goofy without being silly goofy. He was believable goofy. You thought, I'd love to hang out with this fucking guy. He's got to be a nut, right? He was perfect at that. So then as baby faces, he was the simple-minded one that they could kind of take advantage of, and his brother Scott could be the one to say, hey, but you felt sorry. He got sympathy. Even to get sympathy on a guy as big and mean and tough as Rick Steiner was not easy, but because he was so good at it, it was possible.
Well, let's take the Steiners. Were you okay at least with having it be them as opposed to anybody else you like?
Fuck, the Steiners could have beat anybody in the world at that point at any time. They would have just suplexed you on your head till you fucking gave up. I mean, you know, Robbie and Scotty are two of the toughest son of a bitches on the planet. I was just blessed that we're all from Detroit, and before I broke into business, we all pushed iron in the same gym. So they were my friends and buddies way before I got into business.
First of all, let me just say, I'm sure you saw the pictures. You know who showed up, right?
Yes.
Oh, Steiner, yeah.
Yeah, Steiner. Bro.
And Impact Wrestling released a video, some video footage of it too.
Bro, to me, it's just so sad because you talk about somebody that really gave his body to the industry was Steiner.
Right.
And he just looks like kind of, you know, obviously he's not as big as he used to be. He's just like broken down, man, really mellow. And I remember the Scotty Steiner when I first was in WCW, like the first time, like in like early 1990. And I remember one of the most awesome moves, and I'm sure both of you saw this. Remember when Sid Vicious and him had that match, and he picked him up, and he did that blockbuster suplex on him and landed on him and broke his, I think his lung collapsed or broke his rib?
Oh, I've known,
It was the one where, you know how Scott Hall grabs you, like you're going to do a flying body press, and Scott Hall grabs you and then does a sack of shit?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So he grabbed Sid in that position and did a backflip and landed on top of him.
Jesus.
I know. And you know how humongous Sid was. And they were both on the gas. And that was young Scotty Steiner, not Big Poppa Pump. Remember, he would always do the Frankenstein and bang his head on the mat?
Yep.
And I just saw him do so many incredible things. He was such a physical specimen, you know. And you just, you know, it's just sad because, you know, his whole life. Bro, listen to this. He told me he owns a Shoney's.
Yes.
Yeah. No, yes, he's a manager for Shoney's. Yeah, he owns a manager of Shoney's. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine him with a rude customer?
Oh, yeah.
Or a late vendor.
Get the hell out of here and go to Chili's, bitch. I mean, I couldn't believe what he told me that.
Probably the guy that was the most difficult for me to deal with was Bill Goldberg.
Real? That surprises me. Why?
Yes. Well, I think, you know, I think for a couple of reasons. I mean, and again, all my opinion. And I'm talking about, you know, from a professional point of view, you know, not a personal point of view. But I think there was part of Bill that really, you know, started believing his own hype. And, you know, this isn't MMA, and at the end of the day, the stories are written. You know, who wins and who loses, the writer determines that. You know, who gets a championship belt, it's written that way. So none of it is real. It's not real. And I think Bill, you know, had the tendency to, you know, to really, you know, believe his own hype. And I basically say that because I'll never forget, you know, one time, you know, I wanted him to, you know, do a job for Scott Steiner of all people. And I'll never forget, Bill looked me in the eye and basically said to me, he goes, Vince, if this were real, Scott Steiner would not beat me. And I looked Bill back in the eye and I said, well, you know what, Bill? Maybe you need to go tell Scott Steiner that and see what he says.
Yeah. No, maybe we need to make this a shoot and see if old Scotty could pin him 1, 2, 3. I think he could.
I think so, too, because, I mean, Scott Steiner was a legitimate wrestler. You know, Goldberg, you know, had a great collegiate football career, great athlete. I would never take any of that away from him. But, I mean, when it comes to wrestling, you know, Scott Steiner was a legitimate, you know, all-league in college.
All-American, University of Michigan.
I think Bill kind of let the lines get a little blurred, and, you know, he really started buying into the hype of the Goldberg character.
We had matches with Steiner that were just unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And those matches would have got over just as big here or bigger in the States as they did there. I mean, it was there was no doubt that we'd have been a tag team that would have drawn money, would have been popular, been liked. And there was a lot of big takes that we could have worked with too.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of the Steiner brothers, do you think Scott Steiner's kind of underappreciated just as as a wrestler? Because at that time, I think there was no better team to watch than the Steiner brothers. And I think Scott Steiner, he did so many innovative moves that really invented moves that people still use, and some that no one ever duplicated.
Yeah, I always said if I could have a guy to work a single match with on the big show, and it really would be there for you, and you just unbelievable worker with Scotty.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby in his what he did was awesome too, but Scotty had he bumped, he just was physical, he was strong, he was everything. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things what my understanding with Steiner's why they got a huge push and they did great, but in the States of the interviews, and I guess that kind of hurt him a little bit at the beginning. Then Scotty turned out to be one of the best interviewers in the business. And but yeah, I think Scotty got I'm pretty sure the guys got nothing but respect for him, and they all know. I mean, and the fans. I didn't think that was even.
I think some people now just kind of see him as Big Poppa Pump, but maybe they just didn't see him back then. But I remember watching the Steiner brothers. I always thought at the time he was my favorite wrestler to watch.
Yeah, he was. I remember when I'm up there with that malt weighing about 290. Killing people. You always, you get your first class ticket with Scotty because you wouldn't go fly coach with him. You're going up and over. Yeah, he was a powerhouse. But yeah, I really never looked at it that way. But maybe so. But as far as what the guys think and everybody I know, total respect and just a great worker.
Yeah. I always thought, if he would have came up with the Big Poppa Pump character, when he was really in his prime, he would have just been the all-around the best guy in wrestling.
Well, you got to remember the NWO, the number of elite guys were there involved in that. Mm-hmm. Scotty being one of them. Mm-hmm. He started really taking over at periods of time with the mic in group interviews in the ring, and that might have gotten somebody's attention. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of things that could hold a guy back a little bit, and sometimes it's being really good. And definitely Scotty was one of those guys. If there's ever a guy that was really, really good and it kind of might work against him at a certain time, that might have been the time. If you understand what I'm saying, because there's other guys that, there's reasons why, they got the red and the black. And there's reason why guys went this side, that side, and they did this and that. And, and that's one of the reasons. And Scotty was great. He get that mic, he grabbed that top rope and leaned back. He had a damn arm that looked like the state of Texas damn road map out there. And he was funny, he was hilarious, he was good. People, holler if you hear me, whatever it is, and all that crap he did. And, I remember the interview he did when he said something about his ankle bone, his shin bone, to his knee bone, that's where my elbow is. I almost fell right over. But yeah, it was great,
Oh yeah, it's always one of my favorites.
Scott Steiner.
Could definitely be a dick if he wants to, but ain't nobody gonna say shit about it. But I've always said, my couple in-ring experiences with Steiner. He actually saved my life one time. We were working. I forget why it was, but Bubba wasn't there, so I'm filling in for Bubba Dudley. So it's me and Devon, and it's against maybe Scott, and I wouldn't say maybe he was teaming with Test at the time or somebody like that. And a good thing for smaller guys here, a little free advice, like if you're working big guys, it's a good idea to come up with ways for them to get their shit in. That way, you kind of because Scott Steiner, especially with his collegiate fucking background, if he wants to go out there, he could probably rip most guys' fucking heads off. You know, so I'm going in here dressed in a superhero, and I got to figure out how to, you know, make this shit work together. So anyway, he used to do this spot off the second rope, like a like how you would do a superplex, but he would do it like kind of from a torture rack fireman carry position. And so anyway, I figured out some way. I want to put on my cape spot, and I go up, and I'm gonna fly on you, but you come get me, and we'll do that big torture rack super spot. And so of course he popped for it because it's getting his shit in. You know? So anyway, when I climbed up on the pole, I started, and when he stood up, for some reason I started to go backwards. And the pole was right behind this leg, and I'm going to go over the pole right down on the steps. So I'm looking at them steps, and I'm about to go. Like, and I know this is going to hurt. I'm going to land on these steps on my head, neck, and back, and I'm going to be fucked up. And he just grabbed me right by the arm and go, easy, kid. Pull me right back in, and boom. And the good thing about working him, you don't have to really work as hard. You don't have to jump for his suplexes, because he's going to throw you anyway. You know, so it's actually a lot easier. You're just going to take a lot of bumps, but...
All right, let me ask you, if there was one guy during all of the years and all the promotions that you worked for that you had in the locker room, not talking about in the ring, but in the locker room, there's one guy off the top of your head that you can put in the locker room that you know would at least make some kind of a difference, not now with the way the politics are, but if you were starting the company, you want to put this guy in there to shape up the bad seeds, who would that be?
I would have like Scotty Steiner, Kevin Wackles, and Scott Norton. They'd be on the payroll. And I'd tell everyone, I'd sit them down, I'd tell them the way it was going to be. If they didn't like it, go argue with those three.
Right.
Okay? Yeah, you plead your case to them.
Right.
I'd give them a case of beer, whatever they wanted. They could lounge, a lounge room, big TV, whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
8 hours a day, they're on the payroll. You want to talk crap, go and face them.
Right.
I don't think so. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, you just got, no one's a leader. They need a leader. No one's got any guts to make a decision.
What do you think of their choice of Scott Steiner as champion over there?
Real good. He's jacking ratings.
Yeah, he is.
Of course he is. But, you know, they should do the best to enhance him. They should feed him people like that. You know, I mean, they should they should run all the guys through him like they do to Hogan. Give him a fair chance.
Right.
DDP, he should raise his hand, do a job for him. They should do that kind of stuff like that. What egos?
Right.
You know, everyone put DDP over.
The Steiners came to the company. They got to work with you and Tomko at Genesis 2007. What are your thoughts on Scott's time with TNA and getting the chance to work with himself and his brother Rick?
I love both those guys, man. Scott turned out to be one of my good friends. You know, I enjoyed to be in the ring with him. Rick, same way. You know, it's funny that they call me a redneck. Hey, redneck. When they're the rednecks.
Right.
That's the fact, and they know it. But you know, as scary as Scott came across at WCW, I don't know if things changed or what. I enjoyed being around the guy. You know, I really did, and still to this day, you know, our kids play baseball, and I'll see him at tournaments every now and then. And dude, I like being around him. I think it's a super cool guy. It's one guy who understands his limitations, but you'd never know what limitations he has because he hides them so well. I mean, he's not the same Scott Steiner he was before, and I'm not the same AJ Styles I was before, but he knows how to get in there. He knows how to be the bad guy. He gets it, man, and he doesn't have to do much to get it across because he's so intimidating and so intimidating looking.